morning, everybody. We are going to be hard-pressed this morning to keep up with the pace of Dr. Cowell from before, but believe me, I've got 5 people here who probably want to say as much, but they've only got 5 to 10 minutes each. Firstly, so I'm going to get on straight onto it, and we're going to move quite quickly through this program. Nicole Lockwood, who I'm introduced first, and you can probably start making your way here, Director of the Management Consulting Team at KPMG in the areas of public sector and infrastructure, member of the Infrastructure Australia Board, Board of Tourism WA, and a member of the Leadership WA Board itself. She resided in the Pilbara for 7 years until 2012 and is Chair of the Pilbara Development Commission, member of the WA Planning Commission, Director of Horizon Power Board and Councillor of the Shire of Roebourne, and she was President from 2009 to 2011. She's now working for KPMG and is going to present to us the findings of some work that was commissioned by DAFWA. It was to look at the new forms of financing for farming and broad agri-food sectors. It considers the current barriers to investment and investigates the global case studies to identify opportunities for reform. So we're going to see now some outcome of the findings and recommendations from this work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. As you've just heard, we were engaged by the department to undertake this piece of work. For those of you who are interested in having a look at the report, it's on the DAFWA stand, so I encourage you to go and grab a copy throughout the next couple of days. Look, the approach we took to work out what were the current barriers, what were the options in terms of investment structuring, we really consulted quite widely with the network, and that was in relation to operators, insurers, investors, advisors, financiers, and also our global network. And that was to understand what were people seeing as the current opportunities and barriers in the sector, and where could there be opportunities for growth and change in the way that finance is acquired for growth of operations. So we define success as being an agricultural sector with revenues double current levels, having invested to grow production, improve competitiveness and develop a leading market share in Asia's premium food markets by 2025. Now that's distinct from being the food bowl of Asia, and I think that comment's used a lot and there's a bit of ridicule around how realistic that is. The distinction we made here was around premium food products and creating security of supply and also a safe location for the production of food. And I think that the latest berry issue we've had over the last couple of weeks coming out of China has been another reinforcement of where the sector's going and where Australia perhaps has quite a strong place to be in that picture. We identified 5 areas in terms of sort of the platforms for success. So marketing and logistics is about ensuring production is delivered to market at the lowest cost and for the highest price. Conversion from suboptimal production to the highest possible production value, which may include new types of production. Succession is about ensuring Australian agriculture retains and attracts talent that can manage and develop Australia's farm businesses. And productivity growth is through the investment in new infrastructure, technology and operating practices. And finally, around consolidation and looking for opportunities for smaller or less efficient farm practices or farm businesses to turn into or evolve into better performing businesses. So we've certainly seen some fantastic opportunities and examples of investment structures in other sectors, for example in mining, and it was really about why have those not come across to the agri sector. And as I've identified, it's about sort of capitalising on this opportunity in Asia and other parts of the globe. The lessons from mining were interesting to compare in this report, and you'll see that it's not actually about the structures where the barriers exist, it's actually about how the sector's evolved and some opportunities to improve from a business operation point of view. And there's a real opportunity, as you all know, and I think there's a lot of rhetoric at the moment around where agri fits in our long-term future. A number of other thought leaders have put it high up there, along with tourism as being another platform for growth. So we have to act quickly to make sure we don't lose this opportunity. A range of challenges and considerations that we identified. The traditional sources of agriculture funding, being debt and internal equity, are constrained, and they will limit investment into the future. So the increase in debt levels are correlated to increasing property prices, but now that land prices have moderated, this exacerbates the debt burden. So external equity has played a minimal role in financing agriculture, but it's got the greatest potential to finance the future investment in agriculture, and it's about looking at how can we get more of that external equity into the market. Those equity sources come from a range of different places, and they all have their own characteristics, so it's important to identify how they operate and whether they will best fit with your business. But of those investors, retail and institutional institutions are the best suited to Australian agriculture. And in reviewing the global case studies, which I'll talk to in a moment, New Zealand was certainly the standout in terms of comparators. And that was for a range of factors, namely in relation to the amount of subsidy that comes from government, which New Zealand and Australia are very, very similar in that regard. So the report itself reviews a range of external equity sources, including retail, institutional, with both domestic and foreign pension funds, private equity and foreign strategic funds, and the factors affecting their application to the agri sector. So there's pros and cons to using each of these vehicles, and we talk through that in the report. Similarly, we review the various structures, including leasing, share farming, share milking, joint ventures, asset management, public ownership, property trusts, and then also the pros and cons associated with each of those. The conclusions in the analysis is that there is no magic structure that will support the needs of all investors and farmers. It will take a combination of all of these, depending on what your business needs are, to maximise the funds available for investment. But of the external equity funds reviewed, leasing and share farming present the greatest opportunity given the existing market acceptance and the development of more liquid markets to enhance the effectiveness of these structures. So in terms of case studies, we turned to our global network and we looked across the UK, the US, parts of Europe, South America, and unfortunately we were hoping to find a range of fantastic examples that we could bring back to Australia, but most of those markets are heavily subsidised by government or other parts in a range of ways, and it distorts how that market operates. New Zealand really was the standout in terms of a comparable market that has really grown through some of its adversity and become quite innovative. So I think they've really looked to the range of investment structures available and looked at a pathway to building, how they build internal equity and transition through the ownership. There's a real focus on management structures and the way a farm operates in terms of its discipline around its governance processes and its decision making, and that's something that New Zealand as a sector has really tackled to be ready for this type of investment. There's also a marked difference around the separation of operations and land ownership, so there's an opportunity, and that certainly does happen in Western Australia, but to look more vigorously at how you can separate those two, because the types of investors interested in land may be different than those interested in investing in the operations of the business. And as we said before, you would want to use those sorts of equity in a range of, or in combination, rather than looking for any one avenue to be the solution. There's also a range of other local examples in the report, which I encourage you to have a look at. We're certainly not behind the eight ball in terms of there's some fantastic leading lights in our own sector in WA, and I encourage you to reach out to them and talk to them about their experiences. So going forward, the key challenges are around that sort of business management framework. So there's an opportunity around policies, training, and also better governance to look at the financial performance of the business and really open up the opportunities for growth and bring those third parties to the table. There's a range of ways that can be done through the sector itself, through universities, through the department maybe having a role to some extent, but it's certainly up to individual owners how they're running their own business and where they see the opportunities in that regard. There's a sense from international investors around some of the regulation issues and some of the issues around land tenure, where there's an opportunity there to look at reform. Certainly, right now that's in debate around how current land use works, how, obviously the pastoral leases, there's conversation there. There's a range of different areas where there's opportunity to explore that further. And that certainly would change the perception in the market about Australia as a home for investment. So next steps. It is really about becoming investment ready. So for businesses, the opportunity is now to look at how you grow, and it's about defining your growth path. So what do you want for your future? Is growth part of that future? Is it about just improving efficiency or consolidation? But having a really clear picture on what that is important. putting in place management structures and disciplines to optimise the financial performance of the business, and then reviewing the various structures that are available, and our report's one tool for that, but there's certainly a large amount of assistance externally to help you make those decisions. And then addressing those 5 factors that I listed at the start around marketing, conversion, succession, productivity and consolidation to help your business achieve its ultimate growth potential. So happy to take questions, and thanks for your time.
Thanks, Nicole. Just one question to now before we move to the next speaker. How much did the culture of ownership come into your findings?
It was interesting because I think everyone was thinking there would be this new structure that we hadn't heard of in Australia that was going to change the face of Australian agriculture. But when it comes down to it, it is about the way businesses are run, and most of these businesses are family-owned businesses. They've grown over generations, and it's about individuals wanting to take that next step. So it's not about a sector approach, it has to be an individual approach, and it is about where everyone's at in their journey with their own business, and there are opportunities at the table, but it's about being ready for those and wanting to embrace them.
Thank you very much. So we've got a good background to some of the aspects required, and one of the key things that comes as part of Nicole's findings is the need for skills and business managers. And we hear a lot of cases where we need to be prepared and better prepared with skills and our managers. Well, I've got 4 people up here who really are at the forefront of that. The Nuffield Farming Scholars have been around now for quite a while, but we've got 35 scholars in Western Australia, and the investment that's made into their development and training by the Nuffield Scholar program itself has been $1.6 million since 2000 in the 35 Nuffields themselves. There's something like 25 scholarships available throughout Australia this year, and we're now seeing an alumni of Nuffield Scholars that have travelled extensively, invested significant amounts of their own time, used up a fair bit of the emotional capital in their families to achieve what they wanted to achieve. But we're going to ask these 4 people to give you a brief synopsis of their findings to work. So firstly, Chris Reichstein from Mount Burdett Farming Co in Esperance. I first met Chris when he was the president of SEPWA and helping to drive that as a leading grower group. His passion for his industry has seen him involved in a range of other industry organisations. And he's just returned from a trip to Brussels when he gave a presentation about his farming practices. His topic he's going to talk about is how farmers learn greater value from R&D through better extension. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you very much, Peter, and I'd have to say that this is a far more intimidating audience than an audience in Brussels. Anyway, firstly, thank you to GRDC for my Nuffield Scholarship. It's been a fantastic experience. And my subject is how farmers learn. So this was driven by being involved in various local, regional and also state organisations looking at RD and also E. And I was always concerned about why we didn't see some practice change with things that seemed quite obvious. So I decided to embark upon this. So first I'd just like to give you some sort of a worldwide perspective on RD and E, and then a few basic principles, and then look at a couple of the different models. Firstly, on a worldwide basis, we're seeing a real cutback in government spending on RD and E, and I think we've seen that in Australia. It's been quite obvious what's happening there. Around the world, there's very much a move to levy-based funding models, which obviously GRDC is that, and we're also seeing that in New Zealand, where they had a lot of rationalisation and privatisation in the 80s, and also countries such as Denmark, the Netherlands, the UK, and Ireland. Private research is filling some of those gaps, but unfortunately it won't fill all the gaps, because in many cases where there's no financial incentive to actually undertake research in those areas, there's likely to be market failure. So what we're finding now with the changes that we've seen, where we used to have the traditional model with the Ag Department Extension officers, now we have private agronomists, we have agronomists employed by the chemical resellers. We also have universities doing research, we've got GRDC, we've got grower groups, we've got a whole plethora of information, and that we haven't got the coordination that we used to have. So consequently for farmers there's very much an information overload, and one person described it to me like actually trying to take a drink of water from a fire hydrant. So basically we have 2 basic extension models. here, and the traditional top-down model where we actually see the research starting at the top and then going down through development, then being disseminated through the extension people to the grower. And then also the opposite model to that is probably the very collaborative bottom-up model. I'd actually say that the US model is very much a top-down model and the Canadian model, and I'd say that the Australian model is also quite top-down, although with GRDC now using the RCSN network and we're seeing more grower groups, there's a subtle change there. We do actually have one slide missing here. I'll just go back a little bit. So one of the critical things I thought was matching the methodology to the situation, or a few basic principles. One of those was actually identifying the target audience. Who are you actually trying to work with? Is it the innovators? Is it the early adopters? Or is it that broad middle section? Also looking at the constraints or the drivers to adoption and change. And that might be the farmer's knowledge, his aspirations, his skills, or his attitude. So trying to tailor the extension message to meet the criteria. Also, what sort of change are you trying to undertake? Is it a basic tech transfer, which is going to be quite simple, or a system change, which is going to require a whole different suite of resources to actually result in practice change? So when I was in the US, I really saw a very strong example of the top-down learning, and there they have the university system and the extension system. But I went to the field days in Iowa, the Farm Progress Field Days, and one of the things that hit me there was also the use of data, but also the way that probably the larger biotech companies are actually trying to cement a strong relationship with the grower. In this case, we have Monsanto, who bought a company called Climate Corporation, who have got all the publicly available soil data for the US and also years and years of weather records, and bundled that up, and also bought a company called the Precision Planters. Now, with their Field Scripts program, the farmers are hooked in with Monsanto, and they are given advice on when to apply nitrogen, what varieties to be applying, when to be scouting their fields for pest and disease, and also when to be actually spraying and harvesting. The other group that I saw was the bottom-up group, which, a very good example, this is a dairy discussion group. One day in Ireland, I went to this fella's place, Jimmy here. He was part of a dairy discussion group been going for 20 years. We did a lot of benchmarking and opened their books and their production figures, and then we're using the resources of the group to help with decision making. So the benefits of this collaborative model was farmers embrace peer learning. You're utilising the collective wisdom of the group. By doing the benchmarking, you can ground truth your performance, highlight the strengths and weaknesses of the business, and that benchmarking becomes a very strong driver of change on an operational, tactical or strategic level. So change that's driven from within is probably the most sustainable, and that's where I see the true value of benchmarking. In short, we spend a lot of money on R&D, so effective extension is critical. It's about outcomes, not outputs. And I'd say that outcomes is probably a combination of knowledge by confidence, and the peer learning is undervalued, and benchmark is a very useful driver of change. And I'll just leave you with these two quotes here from a person that I met in the top one, and then Norman Borlaug, the father of the Green Revolution. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Just a quick question for you. What attracts farmers to the discussion groups initially, and how do you sustain their participation?
The group that I saw had been going for 25 years. And I suppose there's always challenges within the farming operation. One of the things that sustained that group was actually the social side of it, and I won't say the social side of it, there was the peer support. And one of the other things that I think attracts farmers to it was actually wanting to know what the best people are doing and benchmark their performance against others, and also having access to that collective wisdom of the rest of the group.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, Chris. Now we're going to move to Bob Nixon from Killarney. And Bob's a fourth-generation farmer running another 12,000 hectares. I think we farm up here collectively about 35,000 hectares. He was awarded a scholarship and looking at the topic mitigating risk in a dry and variable climate.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As Peter said, I'm from Clanny in the northeastern wheat belt. I don't know if he actually said that, but I am. We also made 1,200 merino ewes, about a quarter of the stocking rate of 10 years ago. So these two photos highlight the issue. In 2002, our driest year on record, we didn't even get our seed back. And in 2008, a fantastic year resulted in a 45% return in equity. The northeastern wheat belt runs on the 1 in 5 big years. The next big season is overdue for northeastern areas. There has been a strong appreciation in land values all around the world. Businesses have to intensify to compete. In return, this increases the level of risk when things go wrong, which inevitably they do in agriculture. Risk often isn't priced accordingly into land values. With our low land values, we can chase the lower risk margin and couple to economies of scale. Businesses then need to work out when scale stops working for them, the tipping point. For our farm, 12,000 hectares with 2 sets of plant works well. Management becomes the biggest constraint after that. Scale, though, has a big social cost with fewer people in our rural communities. There is no better example than that currently facing the Clanny Football Club. Low soil pH and aluminium toxicity are a big problem in the eastern wheat belt. The large cost of freight required to transport the lime and our low operating margins makes fixing the problem difficult. We've done something a little different on our farm and found our own source of lime, the picture on the right. It is a calcium and magnesium carbonate with 50% neutralising value. We have turned our poorest moral soil paddock on the farm into an asset. It's not a commercial product, just for our own use. Are there similar solutions on your farm? We used to grow a lot of pulses and lupins, but now the only break crop we grow is canola, for many reasons. Canola, following pasture, has been very successful in getting the 2 years of 100% weed control required on problem paddocks. This year we will try Roundup Ready canola following TT canola, a stack rotation. A low input cereal phase will follow. The photo is of 7 years continuous canola in Lethbridge, Canada. After 7 years, there has only been a 20% yield reduction over wider rotations. In a perfect world, with a price on sequestering carbon, perennial grains could have a great fit. With their fantastic root systems for recovering nutrients and lowering recharge, environmental benefits would be large. They would fit well into our low-cost cropping system. We're a lot further away from commercial reality than I'd hoped, but it is one for the future. Are we better off focusing our attention on GM canola rather than wheat? We need a resilient break crop, and I don't believe we have the political will or market acceptance for GM milling wheat. With multiple traits in canola, the reward would potentially outweigh the risk of the large upfront cost. For example, the HB4 gene developed by bioseeds in Argentina for drought and salinity tolerance. Currently, canola works so well in our system because we control inputs like retaining seed and delaying conservative nitrogen management. In conclusion, we need our farming systems to be profitable in decile 3 and 4 years, rainfall years. Business diversification and value adding is difficult in the eastern wheat belt due to the lack of water, labour costs and product range to value add. We have no choice but to be the most efficient, lowest cost producers in the world with the flexibility to adapt to change. Thank you to the GRDC for the brilliant opportunity. The eastern wheat belt is a great place to farm with a lot of opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. In our conversations before today, we were talking about management systems and the skills required. What systems or processes do you put in place to ensure that detail doesn't get lost in your scale in 2 units, given the operation is so tightly managed to manage the risk?
I think it takes a lot. It's basically the person that's in control. Once you get to say 12,000 hectares, you don't switch off. So, for instance, I still soil test by hand because I just see it as essential to, just not get someone else to go and do it and sit in your office. I walk across the paddocks for a couple of weeks of the year, and you stay in touch. You know where there's a little, like it might be half an acre of brome grass in a corner of a paddock, so you know you've got an issue. Not just waiting till the whole paddock blows out, then it becomes a lot bigger issue and a lot bigger, a lot more costly to fix. So I guess that answers the question.
Personal, hands-on.
Yeah, hands-on. And it's very, and I guess the big corporates have had trouble replicating that management system. I don't know if they necessarily have a model that works yet in the Eastern Wheat Belt to get the management on the ground.
Thank you very much, Bob. I'd like to introduce Colin De Grussa. Colin's also from Esperance, large farming, wheat, canola, barley. He has had a different look at community engagement and education for the benefits of the industry. So it's influencing the influencers, how farmers interact with governments and consumers.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, so what I wanted to find out, I guess, was how other people around the world are trying to interact with the government and consumers, or probably more about the community, to try and make sure that they've got the message about what agriculture does. I'd like to start by acknowledging my investors, CBH Group and CSBP, and Nuffield Australia, of course. Without these guys, my research wouldn't have happened, but more importantly, the Nuffield program delivers a lot for agriculture in this state and country. What was the catalyst? A pretty good one. In 2012, I was running around campaigning for the 2013 state election, and I had a phone call from someone, as you do. This particular person wanted to know a bit more about me and what I did. So I sort of had a chat, and it was pretty good. At one point he asked me, what do you think of live export? And I said, it's a very valuable industry to agriculture, of course, with the preface that it's got to have good systems and controls in place. The response I got was, of course, me and everyone in agriculture to die 1,000 horrible deaths. And you can react to that in many different ways. You can get cranky, you can take it personally, or you can ask, why does that person have that opinion of agriculture? Why is it that when surveys like the Reader's Digest survey regularly shows agriculture as one of the top 10 most trusted industries, or farmers are very trusted, why is it that this person thinks that agriculture is evil and that farmers are bad people in society? So what I did then, obviously, was to think about that a little more, which led me to apply for the Nuffield Scholarship and to go and have a look around at what there was. And there are a great many examples around the world of industry bodies, farmer lobbies and other groups working in this space to try and promote agriculture to the community. Some of the examples of the different programs, if you like, for example, by the British NFU, which is the British Farmers Union, a very big union, got a great many members, significant investment made over decades, so they've got a great asset, financial asset, to be able to do this. Probably a little different to Australia. They run some fabulous programs like the Trust the Tractor Assured Food Standards program, which when people see that brand on the product they're buying in the supermarket, they know it's quality, it's British, and it's healthy for them. Would have been handy in recent weeks in Australia to have a similar brand. Those sort of programs are very powerful and exist, get the message straight to the consumer. The California Farm Bureau Federation, very similar, has a great number of programs in this space. Again, they're well resourced, they have a lot of members, and they have the resource to produce television programs, magazines, etc., even going into LA and San Francisco, where people really don't know at all how much food California produces. It is in fact the biggest agriculture state in the US, but ask anyone in LA, they probably wouldn't know that. Again, the CFBF have that great resource of membership and a lot of money. In Germany, though, they have a model that's a little different. And I really like this model. I thought it had a pretty good fit in Australia if we could develop something similar. It's called FNL, Fördergemeinschaft Nachhaltige Landwirtschaft, which means basically the Organisation for the Promotion of Sustainable Agriculture. And what they do is they take funds, so anyone can be a member, from the individual farmer to the farmers' union. The biggest supporters are agribusiness, the big crop protection companies, livestock companies, grain companies, whatever. They're members. They pay six-figure sums to be a member and then get to sit on a board. The structure is typically organised and efficient, probably as you'd expect from Germany. And what they then do is develop a series of programs. They look at what the issues are that are out there. They take a very long-term approach and they go to the community promoting agriculture in whatever way they can. The picture on the top right of the pig, Schweinmobile, is a great example of that. They make a pop-up piggery in the middle of Berlin with a real pig farmer with his pigs and leave it there for a week, and 50,000 people go past and ask this farmer why he does what he does. Isn't that bad for the pigs being in those stalls? And he gets a chance to explain it and people get a chance to see how it works. It's very effective. The beauty of that body is it allows the lobby groups to be lobby groups. It doesn't tread on their toes. It doesn't stop all the other industry bodies doing what they want to do. It allows them to partner up for the bigger picture. Aside from obviously pulling the money together, they also pull a lot of data together, and they become the trusted source then for information about agriculture. So the media can approach them, and we know as an industry they're getting the up-to-date information. An excellent body with a lot of potential. If we could get something similar to happen in Australia, I think that would be extremely useful. So, what are the key things? We know there's a growing disconnection from an increasingly urbanised community. We know that between 2000 to 2012, 40% less people were employed in agribusiness in Australia. That's a lot of people going out of the industry. What does that mean? There's less of us to shout from the treetops about how good we are. It makes it very difficult to combat a growing number of small influence groups. The other thing we've got to remember too is that while there are less of us, we know that many people in urban communities actually don't have an opinion on what we do. They in fact think that they don't have enough information to form an opinion. So we need to fill that space and give them that information. There are plenty of models working in this around the world, plenty of different examples, no shortage of programs. Certainly in Australia it's the same, but it's that coordinated approach that's absolutely critical. How's it going to happen? It's only going to happen if industry works together on it. It's only going to happen if industry and agribusiness is prepared to put their hands in their pocket and stump up the resources required. We need that whole industry to work together on this issue, which is obviously not something particularly easy to do. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Colin. One of the issues we've had, and I think you've raised the sort of key points that across that, but it actually needs a spark or a drive or someone to take the ownership of it. What's the next step? Who and how can we actually pick that person or people or body?
Look, it's a great question, and this is always, I guess, the big perennial challenge in answering this call to come to arms, if you like. I think it needs to be a group respected and neutral enough, and that really does make it hard for farm lobby to be involved in that. There is a group that does pull industry together. There is a group that does promote agriculture in many ways. That group is Nuffield Australia. I actually think there's an opportunity for Nuffield to facilitate this in some way, to bring together the people it already brings together to do what it does now. So perhaps there's an opportunity there for that organisation to step up.
Okay, thank you. Cheers. Thank you very much. So now we're going to introduce Nick Gillett, back up into the wheat belt country in Bencubbin. There he farms 9,000 hectares, principally in crop. And his Nuffield topic was brought about by the challenges he faces in the dryland system and how to improve the financial resilience. So he's looked at innovative ways of improving crop germination and yield in a drying climate. Nick Gillett.
Thanks, Peter. Okay, so obviously I operate a cropping dominant farming business in Ben Cupboard in the Eastern Wheat Belt, which I feel is a great place to farm. We have a mixture of barley and wheat. It's quite a simple program now, and opportunistic pulse crops, canola and what have you, and a few Dorper ewes still running around, shared between my neighbour and sometimes the main road, but they're just still there for the time being. So it's a topic born through necessity. It's to discover ways we can improve financial resilience by improving our cropping knowledge and systems based around crop establishment. It all starts with germination. The topic of crop establishment and yield in a drying climate is immensely broad. The ramifications of its success far-reaching. Financial equity in the Eastern Wheat Belt can change by plus or minus 25% annually in a cropping-dependent business, clearly displaying the investment at risk. There's obviously, with my slide here, there's my own numbers, but there's a strong correlation between yield and surplus. But that's the variability we're in, and you've really got to capture those 1 in 5 years because it keeps you going. Continued poor results can take their toll on the farmer, local communities and the financial institutions behind them, resonating far beyond the farm gate. But not only is the lack of winter rainfall affecting yield potential, the lack of seedbed moisture at seeding further exacerbates the problem, potentially shortening the growing season. Timely emergence is critical for crop yield potential. Given a favourable season and adequate soil moisture, early sown crops have a greater yield potential and water use efficiency. A positive future will require a combination of technologies and management from here and abroad. The rainfall decline must be adapted to. With its inherent value, every drop must be used. And a little bit more variability from our own farm, so we've got an aerial shot. And so this highlights variability, and for me, it highlights an opportunity to improve the way we do things. So we've got residue lines here that's obviously improved our germination. And even through this poor result over here, there's a lot of variation from our plough furrows, header residues as well. And so I think we can learn a lot as we go forward. Breeding-wise, the incorporation of a suite of desirable breeding traits into new crop varieties will help in the short to medium term. Longer and stronger coleoptiles, as seen on the red carb on it on the left-hand side, from the Pacific Northwest and the Washington State, is something that we could aim for. They basically talk a lot about wristwatch sowing depth, and they have a big prerequisite on getting their crop to germinate on stored moisture, and it's got to be up and about before the cold winter and the snow comes in. So there we are, 6-inch coleoptile length, and that's something that could certainly improve. And there's obviously a lot of traits coming forward. There's vigor traits to increase soil exploration to chase more moisture. There's drought-tolerant stay-green traits for optimising grain fill later in the season. But futuristically, there's also hybrid wheat. So the photo to your right is some hybrid wheat from Syngenta in Junction City in Kansas, and they feel that could be 10 to 15 years away. Seed treatment. Commercially available seed treatments need further evaluation, I think, in Australia. In the US, gibberellic acid, a plant hormone, was widely used to assist germination. Others with salicylic acid and various other actives are readily available. The soil, the farmer's greatest asset, must be improved structurally and nutritionally to be more conducive to the drier seasons. Cover is king for evaporation and soil life. New generation hydrophilic polymers within the seed zone to attract moisture around the seed are a possibility down the track. So we've got, this is products here from Solvay. They're based in Bristol in the US and also in Paris and France. And it just shows you real strong attraction this product has to moisture. So easily seen in the Petri dish where you have the treated 10 parts per million in the left-hand side, and just shows you the magnetic attraction. So if we could utilise that sort of product within our seed zone to maintain the seed moisture longer and get that germination, because so often we do seed expecting a germination, and with the drying phase that we have in May and what have you, it just disappears very quickly and we just don't get the crop out of the ground. And on the right here, we've got a product from CSIRO. It's a spray-on film. It's in evaluation at the moment. And it basically works like plastic sheeting on the ground to reduce evaporation. And for us, if we can reduce some of our 100 mils of evaporation annually, it would be great. Early on, some of the early trials suggest that you can get 28% less moisture and still get the same yield with that product on the ground. Machinery-wise, minor adjustments can be made to seeding machinery for moisture seeking and reducing moisture loss. On heavy soil types, we have used the deep furrow on the ripper there, the deep furrows, to try and harvest more water and then use the RTK auto steer technology to come back and chase the moisture. Oops. So in conclusion, I feel that as farmers, we strive towards improving our crop establishment. As dryland farmers, we can improve our financial performance. Timely germination is a strong driver of water use efficiency. Thank you. And thanks to my investor, GRDC, and Nuffield Australia.
So in looking for your solutions, it looks like detail, absolute attention to detail is the key. Is that how it is? So there's less room for slippage?
Oh, that's part of it. That's part of the farming system we're in. But there is, this is a really widely faceted sort of, there's so many variables, so many things we can change to try and drive our results. And it's not going to be just one Band-Aid solution. I travelled far and wide, and I was told before I went on my travels that I was searching for the holy grail of wheat farming in dryland areas, and it's one of those things. It's just little incremental changes to improve the way we do things, but it's something we just can't ignore.
There was a reason that I asked the questions and didn't go to the floor is because we had until 11:30 and it's now 11:30. I'll take one question from the floor, please. Anyone have a question? Up the front here. Now you have to run. Sorry, the microphone's coming. Hang on. There's a good reason I didn't go to the floor. Thank you.
I'll just shout. I just wanted to ask Chris about his farmers group. Oh, here we go.
Less shout now.
I'll be a bit quieter now. The farmers group in Ireland, where they actually get their information from. So I understand about them sharing their information and building on their accumulated knowledge, but how do they source information? We know we don't go to Google.
Sorry, so
How do they
the
source
question
their...
was how they source their information.
Yes, like if they want
the groups were
building
comprised
knowledge.
of anywhere from about 10 to 20 farmers, and they would employ a consultant, a dairy consultant, who would then run all their figures through and benchmark their physical performance and their financial performance. They would get in specialists if they needed to, but generally they were using the collective wisdom in the group. The situation that I saw is where this fellow had bought another 40 hectares and he wanted to know where efficiencies could be held in the system. And he was put through a really strong, vigorous grilling process by the other group members, who then in the end would come back to him with recommendations. They were to the extent of, okay, the cattle that you're using, you've got the wrong, not germplasm, you're using the wrong breeds. You should be selling your heifers, you should get rid of your machinery, you're not measuring your pastures. It was really quite vigorous discussion. I actually felt for poor Jimmy, but at times they were bringing in specialists, but more so they were trying to harness that knowledge that was within the group. It was a really powerful learning experience.
Thank you. That is all we have time for. There's a couple of things. One of the expressions that I like to use, that we need to cultivate the mind to manage the land, and that's clearly what's been happening in the last presentations we've had. And congratulations to each of you for your journeys and sharing your short stories. I'm sure that each of them would be happy to share their longer stories with you over a cup of tea or over lunch and during the next 2 days. I'd also like to commend you to go around to the DAFWA area and pick up a report of the Road to Riches report that was presented earlier. It has a really good background of information and well worth reading. So to each of you, thank you very much for your presentations.